That night, I almost dropped the paintbrush when she spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the quiet like it had been waiting all day for the right moment. I was bent over the fence, paint dripping down the wood when I heard her say, "Would you ever marry someone you didn't really know?" I froze. The brush in my hand hovered over the plank, and I didn't dare turn around right away. Who even asks something like that out of nowhere? Especially when you're covered in sweat and paint stains, not looking your best. I'm 28, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of guy who stays out of trouble. I keep to myself. I work. I help my mom with her house when I can. Nothing flashy. People describe me as reliable, and I guess that's true, but sometimes reliable just means invisible. I never expected that my mother's neighbor, a woman who seemed to live in her own perfect world, would throw a question at me that felt like it could change the ground under my feet. Her name is Laura Mitchell, 37, blonde, sharp eyes behind those black framed glasses. She has this way of looking at you that makes you feel like she already knows what you're about to say. I'd seen her around before, of course. She'd wave from her porch when I visited my mom or smile politely in passing. But it was nothing more than small-town neighborly manners. I thought she was just another chapter in the neighborhood, someone I'd never really get close to. That day, my mom asked me to help paint the old wooden fence between her yard and Laura Mitchell's. Simple enough. The boards were cracked and fading, and I didn't mind the work. I put on an old shirt, grabbed a brush, and settled into the rhythm of long, even strokes. It was honest, mindless labor, the kind I actually enjoy because it keeps me from overthinking. I didn't notice Laura Mitchell at first, not until she stepped out onto her porch with a cup of coffee, watching me the way you'd watch a scene you can't decide if you should interrupt. When I finally glanced up, she was closer, standing just on the other side of the fence, the sunlight behind her catching in her hair. She wasn't smiling wide, but there was a softness on her face like she was trying to read something in me. That's when she asked the question, "Would you ever marry someone you didn't really know?" Her tone was half serious, half playful, and it sent a jolt straight through me. I laughed at first, nervous, because what else was I supposed to do? But she didn't laugh back. She tilted her head, one hand resting against the fence, waiting. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't just making conversation. She wanted to hear my answer. I looked at her properly then, and I noticed the faint sadness in her eyes, the kind you can't disguise, no matter how steady your smile is. I could have brushed it off, said something easy, but instead I stumbled out. "I don't know. I guess maybe if it felt right." My voice cracked like the answer had come from somewhere I didn't even trust myself to admit. Laura Mitchell's lips curved, not into a laugh, but into something quieter. Approval, maybe relief. She nodded slowly like she had just confirmed something she already suspected. And then just as suddenly as she'd asked, she changed the subject. She pointed at the boards, made a comment about how my strokes were cleaner than the last guy she'd hired. But the air between us had shifted. Every time I dipped the brush into the can after that, I felt her presence on the other side, close but unreachable, like the fence wasn't just wood, but some kind of invisible boundary neither of us had crossed until now. I went home that evening with paint on my arms, and her question burned into my head. Would you marry someone you didn't really know? It wasn't just a question anymore. It felt like a door she'd cracked open, waiting to see if I'd walk through. And the worst part was I already knew I wanted to. The next time I saw Laura Mitchell, the fence was already dry. The boards gleamed in a darker shade, neat and even, like proof of a job well done. I told myself I'd finish something simple, nothing more. But when I spotted her walking along the yard with a basket of laundry tucked under one arm, I realized the work hadn't really ended. It had just begun. I tried to play it casual, leaning the paintbrush against the shed, pretending I was only checking on the boards, but she caught me right away. "You keep staring at that fence like it's going to win you an award," she said. Her tone was light, teasing, but her eyes, those sharp, searching eyes, lingered on me. I shrugged and told her it looked better than before. She nodded, but the smile that followed didn't quite reach her eyes. That was when I started to notice the little things. The way her laughter sometimes died halfway. The way her gaze drifted past me when she thought I wasn't looking. There was a heaviness under the surface, something she carried but didn't talk about. And I wasn't sure if I should ask or if that was stepping into territory I had no right to touch. Later that week, my mom mentioned something over dinner. "Laura Mitchell's been through a lot," she said quietly, almost like she regretted bringing it up. I didn't push her, but the word stuck. Through a lot. I wondered what that meant. A divorce, a broken family. The thought of her loneliness made me restless, though I couldn't explain why. The answer came sooner than I expected. One afternoon, I was back at the fence, sanding down the last rough patch I'd missed when a man's voice cut across the yard. "Hey, Nathan Brooks. You planning on moving in with Laura Mitchell or just building her a palace?" It was Mark, a guy from down the street, the type who always seemed to carry a smirk like it was glued to his face. He leaned against his truck, arms crossed, eyes flicking between me and Laura Mitchell's house. I didn't know what to say. His tone was mocking, sharp, and loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Laura Mitchell appeared on her porch, then carrying a glass of water. She froze for half a second when she spotted Mark, then forced a polite smile that didn't belong on her face. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice tight. Mark tipped his cap, still grinning. "Afternoon. Just checking if this kid here knows what he's getting into." Then he climbed back into his truck and drove off, leaving dust and silence behind. Laura Mitchell didn't move at first. She stood there, glass trembling slightly in her hand before setting it down on the railing. "Don't listen to him," she said softly. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw not just sadness, but something raw, almost defensive. "Mark doesn't know when to keep quiet." I wanted to ask what he meant, but the weight in her expression stopped me. She turned away, brushing a strand of hair from her face, as if the moment had already passed. Still, I couldn't shake the anger building inside me. Who was Mark to throw words like that at her? At us, though there wasn't really an us. Not yet. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, she came over to the fence. Her steps were slow, deliberate. I kept my eyes on the brush in my hand, but I could feel her standing there. "You didn't answer me last time," she said suddenly. I looked up, startled. "Answer you?" Her gaze held mine, steady and unblinking. "Would you marry someone you didn't really know?" The world seemed to narrow to just her and me, the fading light casting shadows across her face. I swallowed hard, every smart answer I had rehearsed gone. "I think," I said carefully, "sometimes you don't need to know everything. Sometimes you just feel it." Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something more, but instead she gave the smallest nod and turned back toward her porch. I watched her go, heart pounding, knowing that whatever she was hiding was bigger than a simple question. And I knew deep down that Mark's smirk and my mom's warning were tied to it. But I also knew one more thing. I wasn't going to walk away. By the time summer settled in, whispers had already started circling the neighborhood. Small-town gossip travels faster than any storm. And suddenly, every time I walked past the market or stopped by the hardware store, I felt eyes on me. People didn't need to say Laura Mitchell's name out loud. I could see it written in their glances, the half-smiles, the hushed pauses. When I walked by, my mom noticed it too. One evening, while setting down a plate of roast chicken, she sighed and gave me that look only mothers have. "Nathan Brooks," she said, "people are talking about you, about her." She didn't have to explain who her was. The weight in her voice made it clear. I pushed back my chair, frustrated, telling her it was nonsense, just neighbors who didn't have better things to do. But deep down, I knew the rumors weren't just about fence painting anymore. It got harder to ignore when I saw Mark again. This time at the gas station, leaning against his truck like he owned the whole street. "Careful, Nathan Brooks," he drawled, lighting a cigarette. "She's not as simple as you think. Women like Laura Mitchell, they know how to play the game." His smirk burned hotter than the smoke curling from his lips. I clenched my fists, but I didn't take the bait. Walking away felt harder than throwing a punch. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Laura Mitchell. The way she smiled at me across the fence. The way her laughter always seemed to carry a hidden edge. I wondered what Mark thought he knew, what the neighbors thought they saw. But when morning came and she appeared at the fence, holding a tray with 2 mugs of coffee, none of that mattered. She handed me one, her fingers brushing mine for the briefest second. "They're talking, aren't they?" she asked quietly, her eyes fixed on the rising steam. I wanted to deny it to protect her, but I couldn't lie. I nodded. Laura Mitchell let out a soft, almost bitter laugh. "They always have something to say." Ever since, she stopped herself, biting her lip as though she'd said too much. I waited, but she shook her head, hiding behind a sip of coffee. The silence between us was heavy, but not empty. It was filled with all the things she didn't say. And in that silence, I realized she trusted me enough to let me see her guard slip, even just a little. Later, as I packed up the tools, she leaned on the fence, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "You don't have to stay, Nathan Brooks. You don't have to deal with all this." I turned to her, surprised. "What if I want to?" Her eyes searched mine, sharp yet vulnerable, as though testing the ground before stepping onto it. For a moment, I thought she might smile, but instead, she looked away, whispering, "Then be ready, because once you're in, you're in." That night, I walked home replaying her words over and over. Once you're in, you're in. It wasn't just a warning. It was an invitation and maybe even a confession. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing her voice in my head, feeling the echo of her touch on my hand. And I knew the gossip, Mark, even my mom's disapproval. None of it would stop me now, because Laura Mitchell wasn't just a neighbor anymore. She was the beginning of something I didn't understand, but couldn't turn away from. And whatever she was hiding, I was ready to find out. It happened on a rainy afternoon, the kind where the sky hangs low and gray, pressing down on everything. I'd gone over to the fence, telling myself I needed to fix a loose board. But really, I just wanted to see her. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, drops sliding off the leaves, and Laura Mitchell was already there, standing under the porch roof with her arms folded, watching the yard as though waiting for me. She looked different that day. No glasses, her hair loose and damp from the mist, her expression softer, almost tired. When she saw me, she gave a faint smile that didn't last long. "Nathan Brooks," she said, her voice low. "You should be inside. You'll catch cold out here." "I don't mind the rain," I answered, brushing water from my jacket. "Besides, I thought you might want company." For a moment, I thought she would laugh. Instead, her eyes glistened in the dim light, and she gestured for me to come closer. I crossed the yard, stepping up onto her porch for the first time. My heart pounded like I was trespassing into something sacred. She handed me a towel, then leaned against the railing, silent. I waited, unsure, until she finally spoke. "You've heard things from your mom, from Mark, from everyone, I imagine." I nodded. "Yes, but I don't believe them." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She stared out at the wet grass before whispering, "My husband. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack. He was only 40. One moment he was here. The next her voice cracked and she stopped blinking fast. After that, the neighbors started looking at me differently. Some with pity, some with suspicion. Mark, he was his friend. He thinks I moved on too soon, though. God knows I haven't moved on at all." The weight of her confession settled over us like the rain. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there, the towel clenched in my hands. Finally, I said softly, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." Laura Mitchell gave a small, bitter laugh. "Of course you didn't. I don't tell people. It's easier to let them assume what they want." She turned to me then, her eyes sharp but fragile, a storm trapped behind glass. "But you kept coming back. Even when you knew they were whispering." Her words caught me off guard. I wanted to tell her the truth, that it wasn't bravery. It was something stronger, something I couldn't put into words. Instead, I reached out, hesitating, then let my hand rest gently on hers where it gripped the railing. She didn't pull away. For a long moment we stood like that, the rain pattering on the roof above us, the world blurred and quiet. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly, as though letting herself lean into that touch. When she opened them again, she looked straight at me, "Nathan Brooks," she whispered. "You have to understand, being close to me, it's not simple. It's not safe. People won't forgive it, and I don't know if I can either." I swallowed hard, my chest tight. "Then let me decide what I can handle." Her lips trembled, caught between a smile and tears. And before I could think, before either of us could step back, she leaned closer. Not a kiss, just a closeness. Her forehead brushing mine for a second that felt endless. It was more than any kiss could have been. It was her letting me in. The sound of thunder rolled in the distance, breaking the moment. She pulled back quickly, her face flushed, her walls rising again. "You should go," she said almost firmly, "before the storm gets worse." I wanted to stay to argue, to tell her that storm or no storm, I wasn't leaving. But I saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of wanting too much too soon. So I nodded, stepping off the porch into the rain. As I walked away, soaked to the bone, my heart was racing. I knew nothing would ever be the same. Not after that touch, that confession, that almost kiss, whatever this was, whatever it was becoming. I was already in too deep to turn back. The storm finally passed, but the silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. Days went by where Laura Mitchell didn't step out onto the porch, and I didn't dare knock. The fence stood between our yards like a line we had both crossed once, but weren't sure we could cross again. I spent those days restless, painting scraps of wood I didn't need to paint, fixing tools that weren't broken. Anything to keep my hands busy while my thoughts circled back to her. Then one evening, as the sky burned orange with sunset, she appeared. She was standing by the fence, arms folded, her glasses catching the last light. I sat down the brush and walked over slowly, afraid any sudden movement would make her disappear again. "You didn't come," she said softly, eyes fixed on the boards. "I didn't know if you wanted me to," Laura Mitchell sighed, a sound that carried both relief and regret. "Nathan Brooks, I spent years building walls so no one could reach me. And then you, of all people, you just kept showing up with paint and patience." She looked up, meeting my eyes. "I don't know if I'm ready for what that means." I swallowed hard. The words in my chest tangled. "Neither do I, but I know I don't want to stop." For the first time in days, she smiled, faint, fragile, but real. She stepped closer, her hand brushing against the fence. "Do you know what scared me the most? That question I asked you about marrying someone you didn't know. It wasn't a joke, Nathan Brooks. It was me wondering if anyone could ever look past all of this and still choose me." I felt the air catch in my lungs. Without thinking, I reached out, placing my hand over hers on the wood. "Then maybe you asked the wrong question," I said. "Because it's not about not knowing you, it's about wanting to." Her lips parted, and for a heartbeat, the world held still. Then she let out a shaky laugh, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're too young to talk like that." "Maybe," I admitted, "but I mean it." The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was warm, alive, full of things we hadn't said yet, but would. She squeezed my hand once before pulling away, her eyes shining with something I hadn't seen before. Hope. Just then, Mark's truck rolled past the street, his eyes narrowing as he spotted us. Laura Mitchell stiffened, but I didn't move my hand. For the first time, I didn't care who saw. Let them talk. Let them whisper. This moment wasn't theirs. It was ours. Laura Mitchell drew in a breath, steadying herself. "Nathan Brooks," she whispered, her voice low enough only I could hear. "If you stay, if you really stay, then everything changes." The sun dipped lower, painting her in gold, and I realized I was already past the point of no return. I nodded, heart pounding. "Then let it change." She looked at me for a long moment, searching, measuring before her lips curved into that quiet smile that had undone me from the very beginning. And though she didn't say it, though the words hovered unspoken between us, I knew we'd both already chosen. The fence no longer felt like a boundary. It felt like the beginning of something neither of us had planned, but both of us wanted. And as the last light of day faded, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. I wasn't just fixing fences anymore. I was stepping into a life I never expected.